AI has become a really popular buzzword these days. Many people are worried about it replacing their accounting job, their finance job, their other corporate job. And while it's really difficult to know exactly how accounting and finance and other professions will be affected by AI in the future, I do think that those who are willing to embrace and learn how to use AI to the best of their ability will have an advantage over those who don't. And so in today's video, we're going to talk a little bit about how that we can get better use of AI tools in the professional world. And so I think one thing that could be difficult is really finding good use cases for how best to apply the technology. I know, at least in my professional career, that's been the case. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ariel. I'm a CPA. I work in a corporate accounting role as a manager at the moment, and I'm currently on a mission to try to find the perfect use cases for AI. And so with that being said, I'm going to go over a specific framework that you can use to have better prompting in your communication with chat tools. I'm also going to be sharing some best practices and some little tips and tricks that you could use to help you be better. I think that maybe like many of you, I feel like two kind of ways really to use AI when it comes to chats. And maybe some of you have done what I've done and use AI sometimes as like a therapy tool, right? Just using natural language, typing something up on your phone, asking it questions, talking about life. I know I've personally done that, and while that can be a really fun way, I think, to experiment with AI, when it comes to the more professional world, sometimes when we use just that very plain language, sometimes we don't always get the best results when we're trying to do things like do more deeper research, do more analysis. If you use certain frameworks, you are more likely to get better, more exact, precise results, which is something that we want in those kind of fields. And so there are many different ways to go about prompting AI for better prompt engineering. And so I'm going to share one way that you can do that. There are some different kind of key concepts to add into prompts that'll help you get better results. And so for this, we're going to use a framework that I call SCORE, the SCORE method. And there are many variations of this out there. And so this is just going to be one to hopefully help you fine tune prompts. So with SCORE, the first word being S, and this is going to be your situation. And so for S, for your situation, you're going to want to explain a little bit to AI some of the situational facts or the context related to what you want to do. So for example, I'll explain what I'm trying to do. Maybe I'm a CPA firm and I'm trying to help clients write a newsletter about some upcoming tax strategy, for example, right? So I'm going to kind of explain what I'm trying to do or some of the context behind what I'm trying to do, who I am, what I'm trying to accomplish. So that's going to be your situation. And that's going to be really key. The more little context clues, the more little situational clues that you can give it, it'll help give it a more personalized response. And then the second one is going to be C, and this is going to be constraint. Now, your constraint is where you're going to set specific boundaries or specifications for how you want an answer, right? So maybe you want to say like, hey, I'm creating this newsletter or helping a CPA firm create this newsletter, and I want your response to be in a bullet point format, or I want your response to be in short paragraph format. And you can also add things like different styles, like you want it to sound like a professional tone or a very friendly tone or a very formal tone. So tone, formatting, I want 3 bullet points in a professional but friendly tone regarding these steps, right? So again, that just giving it a little bit of, a constraint of how you want it to give you back the data can be a huge help to kind of getting it in the form that you want before it starts spitting out information. And then the third is O for objective. And so this is where you're going to want to give the prompt the specific objective that you want it to accomplish. So this is the very specific instructions. So we kind of explained some of the situation around what we're trying to do. We gave it the criteria, how we want it to be set up, and then we're going to give it its objective. So very, very specific instructions. This is what we want it to do. So for example, we could say, please explain estimated tax payments so that the client can easily understand them, right? So giving very specific examples like please explain, please analyze, things like that. Give it very specific instructions. And then next is going to be R for role. So role is it's optional but very useful way to enhance a prompt. So giving it roles can help give it context. For example, you could say, your role, please act as a CPA with 10 plus years of experience in tax planning and strategy, right? And so this will help kind of filter and kind of create the AI brain for the prompt. Again, not maybe necessary for every prompt, but can be very helpful for many. And then last but not least is going to be E for example. And so for example, oftentimes it'll do better if you have something similar that you want it to look like. Feeding it any kind of documents you have could be very, very helpful in this situation. So for example, maybe if you've talked about these things with a client in the past, you could feed it an email and say, here's an email example of a prior conversation that I had with a client. Please, format your response similar to this, like match this style, match this clarity, right? When you're going back to some of those constraints or formats, things of that nature, giving it any kind of examples, if available to you, will also help it get the kind of response that you want. So again, that's SCORE: situation, constraint, objective, role, and example. Using that framework, using those elements will help you get better responses when doing research, when trying to analyze things, in your day-to-day, that will enhance your prompting skill beyond some of the just natural, hey, please create this for me, right? Like the more specific you can get, the better. And AI, is, the more systematic you can be in your prompts, sometimes that can help the AI understand a little bit better and give you a lot better results. Now let's talk about a few tips and tricks that you can use to kind of fine tune your prompts, right? So let's discuss some of those. One tip or trick that you could use to enhance your responses beyond the prompting framework that we discussed is doing some truth detecting things. And so what do I mean by this? So, one thing the AI is known for is sometimes hallucinating. And especially when we're doing professional work, that's the last thing that we want. So here are a couple of ways that you can help enhance and help detect if there are any errors in the prompts that it's giving. One easy one is just asking for it to share its results, specifically like where it got the results. So, like links to websites, things like that. That can really help, especially when you're doing research. It can be a great way for you to kind of analyze the sources it's using and make sure that it is legit. Another way is that you can ask it to rate its own confidence, right? So you can say, hey, on a scale from 1 to 10, please rate your response for confidence, 10 being the most confident, 1 being the least confident, and then it'll tell you how confident it is in its own answers. That can also help you kind of judge whether it's just making up facts or whether it's pulling legitimate sources. And then you can also, kind of ask it to play a little bit of a devil's advocate and ask you to, after it's given a response, to then take the counterpoint of that response and give you, reasons why that response is maybe not correct. And so just kind of asking these to kind of make it reason back and forth in a little bit different way can help you when you're trying to fine tune, when you're trying to get accurate information. Another tip is the priming tip. So one way that you can help with your prompting is sometimes to prime it. So a lot of these AIs, they have built-in memory to some extent. And so sometimes asking it, maybe, you're not exactly sure how to ask it what you need it to do. So sometimes maybe starting out with a very broad general question and kind of seeing what kind of results it gives you, and then taking that and then asking a more specific prompt afterwards. It'll take some of that context from the prior conversation and use that in your overall response. So sometimes you can help guide it in the right direction by asking kind of more broad overall questions and then honing in on very specifically what you want. So start broad and then go specific. Another small tip could be using these words in your prompt. Think step by step. When you're trying to do something very systematic, like the other day I was trying to work on experimenting with AI agents and trying to see what I could do to help automatize our AP process a little bit more. And so using the words think step by step in the prompt can sometimes really help it give it a little bit more precise answer, one thing at a time, that can create a little bit more logic in your prompt. So I encourage you, when you're trying to find like a very logical, structured solution to a problem, ask it to think step by step. And I'm curious to see what kind of results that you have in your process. I know that that has definitely something that has helped me to get a little bit better enhanced results and to make the AI think a little bit more critically. And then another one is, this kind of goes back a little bit to the confidence one, but like the self-improvement loop. You never have to accept AI's first draft of something. You can tell it, like after it gives it a draft, to like rate its response, not just on how confident it feels about its response, but ask it to make itself better, right? Say like, hey, I really want this to be better. Ask it to self-critique why it's a good response or a bad response, and have it rewrite and reflect on what itself. And that sometimes can help create a better response as well, especially if you do this like 2 or 3 times. Okay, so now that we've gone over the SCORE framework, we've gone over some different tips and tricks to kind of help fine tune and better your prompts. Let's just go over a few kind of tips. I'm going to give you guys 8 tips that'll just help you improve your ability to use AI chats, especially, when you're using those free tools. So tip number 1, ask AI to ask you questions. Sometimes when you're writing a prompt, maybe, if you ask AI to ask you questions of what it needs, it may, ask you certain things to give additional context that you may have not thought of in the beginning. So you can do this before you start your prompt. You can do this like, maybe prime it, as we talked about, some broad things, and then maybe ask it specific questions to ask you. You could give it a specific prompt, but then say at the end, like, hey, please ask me questions of anything else you need clarification on. This is going to help fine tune maybe some of the holes that you have in your prompt. So that's tip number 1. And then another tip is just to use AI more as a friend and not so much only a tool. And what do I mean like that? Like, make it a collaborator, right? Ask it to clarify, challenge its assumptions, go back and forth with it. The more that you kind of go back and forth in a kind of a conversation, I know I was talking about not being conversational, and I just mean, not so having a system, but be willing to kind of talk back and forth with it, challenge, go back and forth, and kind of fine tune it with your responses. Be willing to put in some of that time, and you'll get a lot better results. And then another one is, I mentioned this a little bit, but when you are doing your objective part of your prompt, use action. Start out that piece with like very specific action words like analyze, research, explain, summarize, write. Using those very specific action verbs will help get you a better response for your objective as well. And then another one, be willing to use AI kind of before and after your tasks, right? So like, before, have it help you write outlines for work, brainstorm ideas, but then after, like, help it proofread. It can help you proofread emails, help you proofread documents that you are trying to analyze. You can use it before and after your task. Try using it in both ways and kind of see what kind of things that you can accomplish with it. And then, I challenge you to try to create your own reusable prompts for work, and share them with your coworkers, and you can become a huge, valuable asset to your company. Find prompts that work really well, test them out, and then share them and create your own prompt library. And with those, as you're creating those prompts, another tip is to continue to iterate, right? Find something, see if it works, fine tune it again, do it again. Continue to improve and challenge your prompts with new information until you get like the absolute perfect result that you can reuse over and over and over again. Be willing to iterate, be willing to change slight things each time to kind of figure out what best works for you. And then another way is to ask it to play different roles. We talked about role being one of the things that you can use in prompts. Like, ask it to answer this from a tax preparation perspective, and then have it answer the question from a financial advisor perspective and an analyst perspective, and see what kind of results you get by changing and experimenting with some of those little roles and testing out the knowledge that it gets and brings back to you. And then last but not least, make sure that you're always double checking AI's responses and thinking critically about the answers that it gives. I've given you lots of different tips to help fine tune these and to get more accurate, consistent results. Ultimately, it's still a tool. Ultimately, you as a professional are still going to be will be judged on the outputs. And so make sure you're reading through those answers and thinking critically about if it's something that you can use, whether it's a suggestion or whether it's analyzing data for you. Always make sure that you're checking your work to help be as a best practice for AI. So your output is only as strong as your input. Prompt with clarity, iterate with curiosity, and you'll level up your AI skills to become a true AI master prompter.